and welcome to Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that examines aspects of sound and image-based cultural production. I'm Paula Blair, and today I'm in East Belfast, and I'm just about to go and meet Jacqueline Wylie, who's an artist based in East Belfast now at Creative Exchange Studios. So I'm very lucky she's going to let me have a look in her studio. We're going to record a chat about her work. We'll probably pick up on themes we've touched on before to do with craft and value around art and issues around gender and disability and age. Thanks so much for everybody who's been sharing and engaging on social media, and huge thanks to our Patreon members. Please stick with us till the end to find out how to do all of those things. And for now, I'll hand over to my chat with artist Jacqueline Wylie.
Hello there.
How do you like to identify?
It's a tiered approach when I meet people usually. I sort of say, oh, I'm an artist. And some people go, okay. And then some people inquire more. So I give them more information. And it's a bit like the Northern Irish thing. I'm from Moygashel, which is a very sectarian, very Protestant area. And so when I meet people, I've got that Northern Irish thing where I say, I come from Dungannon. And they go, oh, I know Dungannon. We're in Dungannon. Or they say, oh, what school did you go to?
Yes.
So I think I've come from that kind of, I usually test. And then sometimes I go through an entire conversation and nobody's really inquired, so they have no idea. Whereas if somebody's interested, I say I'm an artist and they say, oh, do you paint then? So to most people I just say I'm a visual artist.
Okay.
And then recently I finished doing the PhD, so now I'm Dr. Wylie, and so I'm still getting to grips with when do I drop that little bomb in the conversation. Because as an older woman I do find that people's reactions can be quite dismissive. A taxi driver, well, what's that? What does that mean? And I said, I'm a doctor of philosophy. Well, what's that? What's that? He was really aggressive about it. So, I tend to be a bit careful.
Dear.
Yeah. So it's like when to use it. When is it useful? Like when I'm applying for jobs and things like that, I'm Dr. Wylie. And when I'm doing art and I want my work online or for things, I'm Jacqueline Wylie, full name. But most of the time I'm Jackie. So it really does depend on who I'm with. But yeah, basically I'm a visual artist because I work conceptually. It's very ideas based and it's socially engaged practice. So it's very much responding to issues around gender and age and disability. Those are the sort of topics. And the ethics. Now, my PhD was looking at social media, or how artists use social media. I'm really interested in the ethics of social media use. So that's the simplest way of describing what I do.
So there's quite a lot of areas we can think about, because a lot of what you do seems to fall between fault lines or at least it pushes at imposed fault lines between arts and crafts.
Yes.
You do quite a lot of knitting in your work.
Yeah, exactly.
And appropriately I've worn a top that's knitted by my mum today.
Oh right, that's nice. I like that. That's nice. My school uniform was grey, so I sort of see that little lovely, that looks like the school uniform grey. It's lovely, it's a lovely colour. And very good tension. I like your mum's tension.
Yes, everybody usually compliments my mum's tension.
Yes,
so
good tension.
You can see that, that's good. Because we don't really think of knitting as an art form.
Yes.
I think it is, because I grew up, my grandmother, my mum's mum, used to knit beautiful dolls and all sorts of things.
Yes.
And I think they are works of art. I've still got many of them. And the clothes and things that my mum does, I think they're artworks. So you would have challenges then when you incorporate knitting into artwork? I think on your website you would suggest that you paint with knitting.
Yes. I call them knitted paintings. I do large uniform. They're all like a series. They're all the same size. So they're usually like 86 centimetres by 86 centimetres. And that's the sort of size of a piece of knitting that I can do in about a month's time until I start getting bored of it. I was just really interested in the fact that certain practices were gendered, like high art. The sort of ideas around the history of certain materials, like oil painting was seen as high art and bronze casting. So then textiles were seen as feminine. But if you go back in history, they weren't. It was men who did textiles as well. It was very noticeable. I was knitting. I've always knitted. And I remember even on my foundation art course, tutors not liking the fact that I was knitting. And I did a piece, a small square, like a Joseph Albert's square. That's what started it all. Knitted a small knitted square with various shades of blue. And the tutor said, but it's not art, is it? because I'd put it in my sketchbook, and they didn't like the fact that I was doing this. And then I was being pushed to apply to go to art college, and they said, well, you'll do textiles, won't you? And I felt that the women were being pushed into doing, if you were interested in art, you'd do textiles. And a lot of the women were happy with that. They didn't have that kind of ego. They didn't feel confident enough to do fine art. And I said I wanted to do fine art. I even had a tutor saying about how it was a real shame that I wasn't going to do textiles because it was a real loss. It was wasting my time going and doing fine art. I'd also studied archaeology. One of the essays that I did was on textiles, and I really loved the fact that now they're starting to, I think I have a book somewhere about Coptic knitting. I did a project in the Walker Art Gallery. There was 4 artists went in to look at the collection and make work in response to what was in the collection. And I said, can I look at knitting? And the curator said, we don't collect knitting. And I was all like, oh, you don't collect, you don't value it. And he said, no, it was too valuable in the past that they would shred them and remake them. So then I started looking at shoddy. And I just loved that word shoddy, because something's seen as shoddy material. But it was actually valued, so it was recycling. I've always been interested in the history of textiles, the way we value materials and how that's changed in the past. And so, yes, it wasn't seen as a fine art practice, and I got that very much when I was at Foundation. And then looking at works, painting, it was all the modernist stuff, the kind of Jackson Pollock and Franz Klein. Sol LeWitt, I think, was it Stella, Frank Stella, Sol LeWitt, and all those sorts of people. So I started making knitted pieces that echoed or referenced painters. One time in university, I had a tutor come and he said I had to do a tutorial. And he said, but I'm a painter. I can't talk about textiles. And I said, can you not respond to it as a painting? And he went, oh, and he sat there. He sort of sat back in his chair. I said, respond to it as if it was a painting. And then he could talk about what I was doing, the mark making and the way it was constructed and the shape of it. It was like there was a block there. When I find something like that, that's what I like to worry away at. And so somebody said there's a bit of a performative element to what I do because I'm making work that is deliberately pushing people's expectations, and I quite like that. I mean, that's why I like doing the research in social media, because I'm in my 50s and they don't expect me to know anything about using a mobile phone and using social media. A few times people have said, oh, are you on Twitter? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you're on Twitter? Oh, you're on Instagram, and how many followers do you got? And then I would say how many followers I'd got. But you've got more followers than I have, and, that sort of thing. And I like that.
Even thinking about social media, because I know you've incorporated social media and your Twitter followers into artworks that you've displayed. There must be a tension between feeling pressure to use social media to push your persona as an artist and your work through social media, but also you're crossing that boundary and you're using it as art practice and as a platform. Do you use it for all of those things, or is it a mixture?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I ended up writing about in my PhD thesis, because I started off interviewing people who were using social media, and I tried to get a wide range of ages, because I started focusing into digital natives and digital immigrants. So I'm a digital immigrant because I remember a time before the internet and before social media, and now we've got digital natives who've grown up with it. And I kind of found in a couple of articles there was like a cut-off date of around 1980, 1981, when someone born after that time is a digital native, because they've never known anything like life without it. And so even if they choose, younger people do actively choose not to engage with it. And that's what was interesting in the people that I interviewed. Some people were engaging with it, some weren't. And it wasn't an age thing necessarily. And then I got people to talk about why they were getting involved in it. And like, as I say, some people didn't like the fact that they were showing too much of their work, whereas other people were very happy, could see the line between using it to promote what they were doing. And they would show teasers of a performance or an event they were involved in. They wouldn't show the work itself, because then they were concerned about people not coming to an exhibition or not coming to a performance. And so I ended up looking a lot at performance, and I in fact interviewed you and Katrina about it, and I found that was a really interesting parallel to talk about how performance artists feel about how important it is for people to be there and be present when the performance is happening. So I thought there was something like that happening with social media, and I just felt that it was a whole new genre or a place and a platform for making art. So that's why in my research I was trying to identify artists who were using it. So I divided it into, yes, artists who are using it to promote themselves, and I will do that. And then there are artists who are actually using it as the ground for their work. There was an artist who now I can't remember his name, but border bumping, and he made work about the mobile phone and the fact that when does the mobile phone pick up when you've gone, you might have gone to France, like he went to France, but the mobile phone thought he was in Germany because it depends on where the, what do you call, the towers are and when it catches up. So he called it border bumping. And I like that. That was art about the mobile technology itself. So I sort of set out to make work about social media. So that's why I used the Twitter. So I sort of made long lists of my Twitter profiles because I thought each day it would be different because people would unfollow me and new people would follow me. So the idea is each day it was a different piece of work. And I turned it into a large text piece as well and put it on the wall. And so it embodied something that was ephemeral because I took screenshots of the people I was interviewing, like all their Twitter profiles. And like they've changed their profile pictures, they've changed what's on them. That brought up issues about archiving. How is this work archived? I set out to make work about being on social media. So then doing the PhD, finishing it, was incredible because I had far too much. I had interviewed 8 people, so I was analysing their responses, and then I'd done literature search, so I was talking about theories about social media and the internet and ethics and identity and place, and then I also had my own practice. So my own practice got almost written out of it a bit. It was so new and emerging. I don't think the PhD gives you the space to make work and to think about it and then make it again. You just haven't got time to do that. So I did talk a little bit about my practice and I felt it really helped me. I describe myself as a participant observer. The ethics really interested me. Towards the end of the PhD, I started looking at Tinder, like dating site, the dark aspects of social media, and started looking at pornography because the legislation was changing. And I was really struck by the fact that film, the example I used was a film can be passed by the board of classification as not X-rated, but if you take a snippet of it, a picture of a film, and then put it out on social media, that can be classed as pornography. And so that affects artists, you know, what they're sharing. Plus the fact that what you share on social media, on the internet, is going to be there for, that's like heterosterol. She talks a lot about it's going to outlive. So those sort of aspects, the fact that people are sharing information that in 10 years' time or in 100 years' time, how is that information going to be used? I've been meeting people on dating sites, and so I was making art around the conversations, the online conversations, taking screenshots. So then it brings up issues of consent. You know, those people don't know that I'm copying it. I then met a guy I'd met on a fetish dating website. He was into rubber. So I met him and I've taken photographs of him. Now known him for about 2 years and on and off had sessions with him and dressed up and done all. And I've gone to clubs in Dublin and in Cork. It's the whole world. So I've really enjoyed it. It's been given me a whole lease of life. It's been amazing. And then this year I've sort of been meeting people because I've moved here to East Belfast and I'm meeting people in the community. There's a lot of loyalist band members here and I've become friendly with someone who's in a lot of the bands. So I'm taking photographs of him. That's what I'm going to do this year, take photographs of him in all his regalia.
There's a parallel there with the dressing up and
well, I can't quite, I know there is.
Yeah,
there is,
that's
definitely.
really fascinating.
Well, because some of the people that I'm meeting are into both.
And do you think then there's a secret life going on?
Well, he was telling me about when they join the lodge, they go through initiation ceremonies and stuff.
The homosocial culture of it all.
Homoculture.
Homosocial, so it's
homosocial, that's a great.
All men, all boys together kind of idea.
Yes, very
That's
much.
just a fine dipping point over to something else there.
Yes.
That they would be very adverse to normally.
Well, exactly. Because a lot of them are religious, you know, they go to church, but they're also doing all this stuff.
All this kinky stuff. How
fascinating. So I thought that was really interesting. Social media gives me a way into this. But so I did last year, I got a SIAP grant for a new camera, which was brilliant, and for new equipment. Some of the money was for some courses, so I attended courses at Belfast Exposed. So that's been fantastic. Like I used to take photographs, and if they were blurry, I would say, "Oh, that's a rubbish photograph." And then I was like, "No." That's really, I know a bit more about what I'm doing, and actually I'm able to appreciate now what's a good photograph. You know, what am I trying to achieve with my photography? Because I've been taking photographs since I was 14.
Yeah.
But I always used it more of a sketchbook kind of way of working my way into a subject, taking photographs and then using motifs from the photographs to make work. And so I never thought of them as works in their own right. So then I've been printing things on gilet, you know, fine quality paper, you know, getting into the printing. Some of the courses were for Photoshop. Because of course I say, because I'm a digital immigrant, I mean, I never learned how to use Photoshop or Lightroom or all this sort of stuff. So I went on a couple of courses. So now I feel a lot more comfortable. I know how to size the photographs and how to edit them and what I'm trying to achieve with them. Now I know I'm doing constructed photographs, the ones when I'm meeting people and taking photographs of them. They're kind of like constructed photographs. And then I'm also doing a lot of documentary photography because I'm going out and following the parades and taking photographs and the bonfires and all that sort of stuff. And so that's what I'm trying to do now, because I want to do a photo book. That's the direction I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah.
So doing them not as like necessarily trying to print them up big, because I have done that last year. I printed some of these photographs really big, like A0 size, and showed them in exhibitions just to test, you know, to see how people responded to them. But I really like the fact that you can build up a kind of narrative in a book, because I've been looking at a lot of photo books now. That's what I'm realising, that's what I think I really want to do.
Cool.
So there's a course in Dublin called Read That Image, so I'm applying for that. But I'm also just trying to see where the work takes me.
Yeah.
I think after the PhD, after the level of theory and philosophy and so, just to be back in the studio and just making work and, as I say, reading, I'm looking at some Paul Muldoon poetry, and that's how I tend to work. The reading informs the ideas. It's been very much like after the PhD, that was my goal for like 5 years. And now it's very tempting to put in another big project, but I actually think I needed just time making new work and reading. And I've bought a house in East Belfast, so it's taking time to get used to living here. Because I feel like I've moved around a lot.
Yes, that was something I was going to ask, because you were based in Manchester for a long time.
Yes.
And how was it? Firstly, being a Northern Irish person moving there, and then having a life in Manchester, and then coming back.
Yeah, well, that's why I think part of that, how I'm describing the work I'm doing, documenting the bands, because I sort of see myself as part of an Irish diaspora. I left school in about 79, 80, and that's when I went to university. There's still the Troubles. So we were just encouraged to get out in Northern Ireland. I went and I lived in Wales for about 4 years, went to university there and studied archaeology, history and archaeology. And then I spent about 10 years being an archaeologist. I wasn't an artist originally. And I travelled around living in tents and in squats and digging. I had no plan, no big career plans. And then I ended up moving to Manchester, partly because my partner, I met him at university and his parents were in Manchester. But I applied for a job in Macclesfield, which is just outside. So I lived for 2 years in Macclesfield, working at the Silk Museum. So it's the textiles, you see. As I studied archaeology and then did an MA in building conservation. And that was my big passion, was architecture. And I think in another life, if I'd been a boy, I would have been an architect. I would have been encouraged to go to school and do it. But because I was a girl, it was not the same. Like, you can't do. The only careers advice I got at school was, it takes 7 years to become an architect. And by that time, you'll be married with children. So I went, oh, okay then. And so it was partly my not being persistent and not having... But I come from a working class background.
Exactly, yeah.
And I wasn't encouraged to go to... I'm the only one in my family who's gone to university.
Yeah.
So they think I'm a bit of an oddball as it is. But that's a digression. So I moved to Manchester to work as an archaeologist. And then I ended up at the archaeology unit in the university and worked there for 2 years. That was great. And then I did my MA there in building conservation. And so I go around recording old buildings and doing research, documentary research. And I loved it. But I'd always had my interest in art. But because it was not valued, you know, nobody encouraged me to go to art college.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I did apply to do foundation in Belfast and got accepted. But I wanted to leave Northern Ireland.
Right.
So I went to university instead of going to art college. So I've come from so I worked there, and then I did my art degree in Stoke-on-Trent. I started doing a foundation course there as a mature student, just to get art out of my system, and then got sucked in.
Of course.
Just to get. I was going to do some pottery, ceramic classes, and do some textiles and sewing and stuff, and then got sucked in, and then ended up. Well, one of my friends went to Stoke, and I went to visit her and talked to the tutors, and they said, "Do you want to bring your portfolio down?" They were so encouraging and so nice.
Right.
And I took it down, and I applied to a couple. I got an interview at Goldsmiths, I got an interview at Chelsea, didn't get offered a place, and then Stoke-on-Trent offered me a place. So I thought, just go. I'm a mature student, just get on with it, just do it, stop faffing around. And I loved it. And then I had a studio in Manchester at Rogue Studios, and was making work. But I had part-time jobs, so it was always very part-time. And I felt like I'd hit a point where I just wasn't really getting very far. I'd always had the idea of doing a PhD. In about 2000, I went down to London and talked to somebody at Goldsmiths. And they said, yeah, they would be interested in me doing. And then that would have been about textiles. I was doing a lot of knitting then, just doing these big knitted pieces. And then I started about 2011, did a project with 2 other artists. There's a very large building, the Beetham Tower in Manchester.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and so we just
That scares me.
Yeah, well, we started doing this research. A friend of mine, an artist friend, is really into astronomy. So she was talking about sundials. So we started there.
Okay.
So she said there's a name for it. But you know the bit in the middle of the sundial, because the sun hits it, that's what makes it a sundial. It meant that a certain day, and we took the Summer Solstice. So wherever the sun landed every hour, we marked the hours. So we decided we would do this on social media as well. So we had a Facebook page and a Twitter page. We had about 400 people following us. On the day, a Guardian reporter turned up and was following us. He said, "Oh, I found you. And the newspaper had done an animation of the dial tour.
Nice.
They'd done that. And then there was a primary school, were following us on Twitter. I had never had anything that went viral before.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of origins of why I put together the proposal for the PhD, to study this, what is happening on social media, and then got it accepted. I applied to Manchester, because I was, to be honest with you, quite happy just to have stayed in Manchester and done it there. Didn't get offered a place there, but got offered a place in Belfast, because it was a fully funded PhD, so I moved. I'd been in a long-term relationship and I had finished, and so it was like a good time to move, you know what I mean? Like, we'd split up probably about 5 years before that, and we had a lot of friends in common, and I'd go to openings and he'd be, you know, he's an artist as well, he's an artist and a writer, and we'd bump into each other, and it was just sort of like, just the idea of being in Belfast. And my dad was ill, so I came back to Belfast and was able to spend more time with my family. So it worked out. But yeah, it was a big risk. I thought, I'm going to hate it. But I'd been coming back to visit my family regularly, and I noticed that Belfast was becoming this interesting place to be. And I said, okay, well, why not? And it has been a fantastic experience for me, having the access to a library again, because like in Manchester I didn't really have access to stuff, and going to conferences, I'd never done that. You see, there's a whole world of going to things. And then Visual Arts Ireland has been amazing.
Yeah.
They are so much more active. In Manchester, you just worked away in your studio and there wasn't as much stuff, and you didn't get to meet Arts Council people, because Arts Council of us covers such a network. It's like up to Cumbria, it's a huge area. I had read some articles about how per capita artists here get more support. It's because there's fewer artists. And so I thought, it's a risk. And like now I've committed to staying here after finishing the PhD. So it was 5 years doing the PhD with corrections at the end and finishing it all. I'm sort of trying to make sense of it now, and like, where do I fit into this art psychology, and can I make a living? Because it's difficult at the minute. I've got very little money coming in, and I don't have someone supporting me. And I know the traditional model is I meet people who come from upper middle class families, and their parents will support them, you know, until they get with a gallery or get some kind of income. And like, I don't have that kind of thing. It can be very discouraging at times, you know, very worrying. At the end of the PhD, I just ran out of money completely. I was really struggling. because you end up having to get the extensions. And my supervisor said, I said, oh, maybe I could get a part-time job. And they said, no, they won't give you the extension, because they only give you the extension on the understanding that you're working full-time on the PhD. So if you're doing like more than 16 hours a week, they will not give you an extension. So now it's like trying to sort out 5 years later. 5 years is a long time in the art world. Things have changed. And even the attitudes towards social media. Because when I started doing the research, it was very sort of utopian. Oh, isn't this great? But people understand now the problems with social media. But that's why I think the research that I've done is so relevant, because I'm looking at that ethics. I designed and delivered a short workshop to some primary school kids here locally. Just getting them to talk about what social media platforms are they on. Do they know what the age limits are on them? Because most of them, like Facebook, you have to be 15. I think that's 18. Or, you know, some of them are higher, or with parents' consent. And they didn't know. Some of them did. Some of them, I was surprised at how some of them were very well informed. And if people, strangers, approach them, try to make friends with them, what do you do? And some of them were like, oh, I don't know. And others were saying, oh, I would talk to my mummy and I would discuss this with them, who this person was. And what would you do if you were being bullied? Who would you talk to? And like all of them were saying, oh yeah, they were being bullied. You know, people had experienced bullying. It's a big important issue. And then what's happening is like some of the adults don't understand how important this is. And I was kind of arguing that a lot of artists, like teaching, when I was doing the PhD, they weren't seeing the students' activity on social media as part of their practice. And I was arguing that it is. That you need to engage with what these students are doing and saying on social media. It's like another aspect of their practice. You know, when you're at art college, they talk about you doing your artist statement and your CV, but now they need to be talking about what is your social media profile. The classic one I used to always say, I remember a girl, she was a girl at the time, and she was a curator and professionally very ambitious, but she was posting pictures of herself, like one time slumped on a, you know, with her friends, like very, very drunk, surrounded by beer bottles. And I thought, well, if a potential employer saw that, they might not be so impressed. So, you know, it's like managing your profile, and it's not something that I've had to be very aware of. But like, say, living in Manchester and working away there, nobody knew who I was, nobody knew what I was doing. Now on social media, I'm chatting to people across the globe, and they do know who I am. And that's what I liked about it. It's the access that you have to people is amazing. But then you have to be responsible and careful, because I've fallen out with people, and people have disliked comments that I've made on social media. And then that affects then when I'm applying for things. If they don't like something I've maybe been critical of something on social media, they don't like it. So then I have to learn to be a little bit like
diplomatic,
a bit more diplomatic when I
voice your opinion,
especially late at night when I've had a glass or two of wine. I know now personally in my practice, it's not just about making the work, it is about establishing relationships with people, curators and galleries. What came out of this thing on Tuesday when I went to the VAI talk was, I don't really know where I am in this, trying to maintain relationships with people. I don't think I've been very consistent, or I've had like a clear idea of what I'm supposed to be doing. There's probably been opportunities that I've missed out on, but I never saw it as a career choice. I was just going from one interesting thing to the next. And I did the ACES scheme. I got funding from Arts Council Northern Ireland. That was like 2015-16, and that was really good. And I was saying then, one of the best pieces of advice was, like, I was just doing a big project and then a wee one, and they said, no, you've got to stop doing that. You've got to be more strategic. And they were saying, you need to be looking at which galleries you want to be with. And I said, yeah, but I've got galleries I'd like to be with, but there's no way I'm going to get in them. And she said, yeah, but you can't think like that. No. You got to be more clear about where your work fits, and don't be approaching galleries that, there's no way, they're not going to show your kind of work. But you need to be more clear about establishing relationships with people who are interested in the kind of art, you know, the way that you work, and working at that. And I've not been that strategic, you know, about it, but I'm learning to be like.
I suppose you're either that kind of person or you're not, and I wouldn't be that sort of strategic person. It's just, well, I need a job, so whatever comes along, please. But some people just seem to have the knack.
Yes.
But yes, it must
they do, don't they? They clearly see how it works. Whereas I feel sometimes there's like social cues. You know, it's almost like a form of autism or something. I go to openings and I can see there's a lot of subtle social cues going on. And I feel a lot of it goes over my head. And I think a lot of people feel the same way as I do. I've talked to artists who've like maybe been really, really successful and have had a run of really big shows and doing really well. And then 6 months later, or maybe 2 or 3 years later, say, you know, I was really depressed and it was so much stress and so much pressure. And you only see, oh, look, they're at a big opening and they're drinking champagne and their nice suit. But they're saying, yeah, but I couldn't pay my bills and I'm supposed to be like...
It's a performance.
It's a performance.
Yeah.
And I think that I sometimes let myself down because I don't do the performing. And then I allow people to have prejudices about me and act on those prejudices. And I think I'm beginning to realise, I need to manage that side of things a bit better. I mean, it all takes time. I don't think there's easy answers to any of this sort of stuff because you're still trying to be an authentic, be the person yourself. My art practice is only just a subset of me. I've got my family and I've got interests that are nothing to do with art. Whereas some people just live and that's it. That's what they do. I've never been that kind of person. As I say, I'm actually volunteering in Tourist. They're doing a research project. I'm learning Irish, so I've been doing some Irish lessons. And I got funding to do research into census returns during the war, like Irish speakers in East Belfast, Protestant Irish speakers in East Belfast. And so I'm trying to do a day a week doing that. See, I did census research in the 80s. Well, that was all on microfiche and going through like card indexes and stuff. Whereas this, we're doing it all online, an Excel sheet, spreadsheet. So it's good for me to update my research, keep that kind of side of things.
Yeah, and it's other skills and it's all useful.
Yeah. So I just hope that something will come out of it as long as I can keep earning a bit of money to take over. It's a crazy time at the minute with the Brexit and everything.
So uncertain, especially here.
And in academia, because a lot of the funding is European money. So
exactly.
The universities are going to manage. We get funding here in the studio. We get some Arts Council money and it's been frozen for the last couple of years. And that's an achievement, even the fact that it's frozen, because a lot of other organisations have actually had to deal with cuts. And we constantly, because I'm one of the studio reps, and so we have to talk about how do we keep the costs down and how would we deal with if in this round of funding, if we get a cut, because everything's pared back as it is.
And it is quite a scary climate with so many of the studios and art spaces having their funding entirely pulled. And you're thinking, well, who's going to be next? And what about next year if there's still no stormont and there's still no budget? And what about Brexit? And
because we've got that double whammy. Like you say, we've got the Brexit thing, which is bad enough, but the fact that stormont, they aren't
it's been
doing
over 2
anything.
years now. It's awful.
That's one of the big aspects. I know that you'd asked about coming back to Northern Ireland. I felt very much like I was like 18, 19 when I left.
Yeah.
And I just walked away. I was like, fuck this place. You know, it's just horrible. The fact that I came back, I got to come to terms with all that stuff that's happened.
Absolutely.
I don't understand a lot of the politics. Because I lived in Manchester and I was used to working in a diverse working environment and we were getting training in gender awareness, all the new legislation coming in. I'm not used to living somewhere so white and so racist and homophobic. Yeah. And you have to be careful what you say.
You do.
And then I'm trying to work my way through how I relate to the politics. Issues around abortion, issues around gay marriage. Well, friends of mine in Manchester got married. I've gone to weddings and stuff. And then to move here and people are still arguing over cakes. Bit of a step back.
Yeah, because living in England now myself, it just feels so frustrating that things are still so behind here when I come back.
Yes.
I'm constantly monitoring what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And feeling this sense of urgency. And I find more and more that MPs over in England are taking it more seriously here. They're starting to listen because they can see. I think if one good thing comes out of Brexit actually is that the DUP have had a public platform and people are seeing them for what they are.
Yes.
A lot of MPs, especially in England, are becoming very sympathetic with what people are stuck with over here.
Yes.
It's easy to say, well, you get the politicians you vote for, but that's the problem, is it's not really that easy over here because people are voting for certain reasons and there's paramilitary involvement still and people are not voting because they're sick of it all, and so it's a very narrow slice of the population that's actually casting a vote. It's a very complicated scenario that's not really going to change anytime soon because of a lot of different factors.
Well, in the last couple of weeks, I had the community worker got
Yeah.
killed in this area.
Oh gosh, no.
And that was UVF involvement. And I think it's actually challenging. A lot of people aren't happy with what happened and how it happened. It's revealing to people that a lot of it was around drugs and debt. People were in debt because the paramilitaries are selling drugs to people. So like you say, there's complications, and I'm beginning to start to understand, talking to people. Yeah, we've got a long way to go. There's a lot of attitudes here which haven't been like in England, people have been challenging stuff. You're talking about things that have been happening over the last 20, 30 years. You're not just like a groundswell. Whereas here, you feel like people just haven't got beyond the basics. And I feel it's more similar to the Trump phenomenon. The people are voting for him, and I feel like, can you see the same person that I see? Because I find him totally repulsive. But there's a whole big section in America who really like him.
They're convinced by
They
him.
like him.
Yeah.
They actually believe him, they accept him, and they think that he's doing a good job. And that's what's really scary, because it's the same here. It's the DEP. I'm looking at them and thinking, these people are terrible. But there's a big section who think
They're great.
they're great. They're our representatives, and they're really happy with what they're doing.
And it's trying to understand that and finding ways of very gently asking them to begin slightly, a wee bit questioning it. Tiny bit, just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Please don't kill me.
I lived in a nice part of Manchester. I mean, Manchester was still a rough place to live in. There was high crime rates, but there were a lot of artists and musicians in the area. I lived in Charlton, so it was a very sort of bohemian area. And whereas here, even just the street environment, nobody really looks after the streets.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to put a lot of effort into the environment they live in, and don't seem to understand the connection. There's a lot of ill health here, a lot of addiction, a lot of problems, and people are overweight. I think it's a lot to do with the environment. It feels like there's so much that needs to change.
Yeah, there's a collective depression and there's a collective trauma.
Yeah, I agree.
With the place, and it does pass down, and a lot of younger ones would insist that all the troubles that's in the past, it's nothing to do with us, but it is in them whether they realise it or not.
This is sort of harshness and quite a brutal attitude where people got sealed off and protected themselves and in their little communities, and they had to do that to survive. But it can be quite, like, to an outsider it comes across as quite harsh and judgmental, but I can see why the origins of it. The good example was when the Connswater, they've spent about 8 million doing up along the river. It's beautiful. And when I first moved here, it was like a building site, and I didn't know what they were doing. And now I walk along it regularly, and it's great. It's a lovely amenity. But 2 years ago, they started building a bonfire in the middle of the green. And the bonfires just ruin the place. And also they're doing now, you see, when I was a kid, they were just sticks and bits of furniture, and you could stand around them. So now they're these pallets that they build. The one in Moyashel, where I come from, was like 500 feet high or something ridiculous. It was over 100 feet, maybe I'm exaggerating, ridiculously high. And so when it started to burn, it was so hot, we all had to move really far away. So I was trying to take photographs, couldn't even get any decent photographs, so I had to walk so far. And there's this huge black column of smoke that came out of it, because it's full of tires. And I just think we're just breathing this in.
I know, it's toxic.
It's toxic. And people are saying it's culture.
Yes, and what is culture? And, you know, if you stop them from doing it, you're denying culture, and I want to breathe.
So I'm sort of doing the photography by going to the marches and doing marching season and taking photographs. It's part of like normalising it. I think it needs to become, not that it's on the margins and risky behaviour, but that it comes into the community and monitored by the community. Because one of my little bugbears is when they have the parade. But last year I went to one, and it was an evening parade. Came by, I took photographs, and then when they went, the place was littered with rubbish. And I just thought, this is your environment, you know.
I suppose they're just expecting the council to clean it up after them.
I'm very interested in this whole conversation around gentrification. Because people talk about gentrification as a bad thing. But I actually think that anything that makes an environment, I don't agree with pricing people out of where they
Yeah.
live, which is what's happened
Yes,
recently with the cultural quarter. You know, a lot of people are moving here. There's a lot of artists moving to East Belfast. Quite a few studio groups have moved over here now. I think there's a lot to be said for improving people's environment and making it feel safe, because it does affect issues around depression. There is a reason why there's like really high suicide rates here. There's really high depression, and it is partly environmental. It's also the fact that there are no jobs and no security. Since I've come back, I'm sort of trying to come to terms with a lot of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Living in Manchester, I was living in a big city, so you can kind of feel almost like a bit above a lot of that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? You're in your little bohemian enclave, you know, in Charlton. Whereas here, I feel a wee bit more
Thrown into the middle of it
the
all.
interface. I'm living on an interface. There are two very different cultures living side by side, and every now and again things
They
kind of
flare up.
But when that community worker, Ian, I can't remember what his second name is, when he was killed recently, apparently a lot of people came from Short Strand, came over. So it brought the two communities together, which was quite good. So we need more good things. Not that somebody has to get killed.
I know.
But,
I was wondering if you felt interested in talking a bit about being a member of a studio group. Is that really important as a practitioner? And you said before about feeling maybe quite isolated in Manchester.
yes.
How important is the studio environment working
Yeah,
here?
it became more important to me when I first graduated, and because I studied in Staffordshire, you know, Stoke-on-Trent, and I moved back to Manchester. So I hadn't been at college there, and so I didn't really know people, didn't know stuff. So for the first year, I thought, oh, I don't need a studio. I can just work. My work is all about knitting and the domestics, so why do I need a studio? And then I had all these big pieces of work sitting everywhere, and it was like tripping over stuff. I applied and got into Rogue. There were two main studio groups in Manchester then. Can't remember the name of them, but it was a painting group, mainly painters. And then Rogue was the fact that it was mixed. It was sculptors, musicians, it was a bit of a mix. So I went in there with all my knitted pieces, and I got a studio there. So I was there for like 15 years in the end. The studio really did work. It was somewhere to go to work. If I was at home, I'd put the washing machine on and do domestic things, whereas here all I can do is like get a book out and think about things. And also for manufacturing, I realised cutting up big bits of wood and making frames and stuff was really important. So the space is really good, but I do like the fact that you come in and say, now normally it's quite quiet here. Normally people put their heads, even because there's only about 12 of us in here, it's quite small. So at Rogue, I got friends with people. So when I went to openings, I knew people, and curators would come in, and we did an open studio every year, and it was like an open weekend. So we had this mad Friday night party, loads of people drinking. And then over the Saturday and Sunday, people would come in, and I would sell a lot of work. It was really good. I would sell the knitted pieces, but I also sold works on paper. And so that's what a lot of art, and that's what I want to work on now, is having pieces mounted and, you know, in some cellophane and accessible pieces, you know, reasonably priced pieces. For me, it was really good because then it was an indication of what people liked. It made me feel like I was meeting my audience. You know? And then, of course, the social media came in, and that's what I liked, the fact that you had this link with your audience, because up to that, you see, you didn't have that. Unless you were exhibiting and you go to an opening and then you'd meet people. It was harder to network. I did some studio visits, but I got into the habit. I was working part-time, so I spent half the week working and half the week in the studio. And I sort of got out of the way. I wasn't doing studio visits. I was exhibiting, but after doing it for about 10 years, as I say, I think I lost a wee bit of momentum. About 2005 I started, so I'd had about maybe 6 or 7 years after graduating. Felt like, okay, I'd done exhibitions, I'd sold work. What was the next sort of stage? And then started doing the PhD, and then now it felt important to get a studio. I was very disappointed that I didn't get a studio as part of the PhD, and there's a lot of criticism of it. And I think they missed a trick there, because when I was doing my degree, we worked in with the MA lot, the PhD lot. So I could go over and just have like a wee tutorial with somebody who was doing a PhD. I found that really valuable. And I couldn't believe that they didn't want us in there, that they were missing out on. So there was some reason why they didn't want that. So I got a studio. I was at Pollen. I had a desk there. It was a tiny space, but we had a big space that we could use for performances and stuff. And that was great, because we ended up doing several performances together as a group. I learned a lot from that. You know, really, really did. That kind of really kept me going. But I had put all my stuff in storage when I moved from Manchester. So it had been in boxes. So then I got it all moved. I moved my studio, decided I was going to stay here. This is where all these boxes are still boxes from. I'm still trying to sort through. Like opening boxes and finding things that are being like, well, what's this? And books and things. And it's been quite sort of emotional, really.
Yeah.
And trying to process all this stuff. But like I need the space. But this is good here because it has the heating and it has Wi-Fi. And I need that. I think before, if you were a painter, you just needed like a space.
Yeah.
I went to see your guy Bacon's studio when I was down in Dublin, and I read his biography. It's in there somewhere, and that was really interesting. And he just had this just mess, and everything was laid on top. Like he'd be working on something, throw it aside, and it was sort of built up. Whereas because I do the knitted pieces, I have to have like a clean area and then have a paint. And I'm trying to do more painting, getting back into doing that again, painting. I've got a lot of watercolours and I've gotten chalks and pastels and things that I used to use years ago. They're all here, all my pastels and things. I think it's really important to have a studio practice because it changes. You know, I say sometimes I'm working on photography, so I need a space to get the computer out and the editing stuff. And now I've got access to, this is like an iMac, so I've got that's my next stage, is to get that out. Because the minute I'm working on a little laptop, like trying to edit photographs and trying
you need to be able to really see
it, and that it won't crash, you know, the memory thing. So that's why I've got this now. I'm going to get that out and start working. So that's a lot of the time is spent on that. I've spent very little time actually making work. And at the minute, it's a lot of it's admin stuff. So the internet's really important, emails. So it's all kind of changed a lot from when I started. So being part of the studio group's really important because I feel I learn a lot about what's going on elsewhere, get information. And I think it does carry a certain amount of credibility when you're talking to curators and you're applying for things and you say, you know, that the fact that you've got a space that they can come and visit you, I think it's actually quite important.
And I suppose then you've got your own website and a studio website that you're on as well.
So I need to do a wee bit more work and make sure it's all linked up. And then what I also set up, like I said, I set up a Patreon, but I haven't done anything with it. Because I need product. I need to decide what is it I'm actually trying to offer, what am I trying to sell here. And I've also been selling a lot of stuff on eBay for years. I've been doing. That's my little side hustle. Because I buy things at car boot sale. I can go example. But some of the stuff in there, there's not so much now. I buy collectibles and things, you know, and all that stuff about knitting. I've got so many like old, if I see an old knitting book, like these are all, where are they? All these kinds of stuff. Like if I find, some of them are really old, and I'm thinking, here's a good example. So I'm always buying old books, complete knitting books. And now I need to sort of think, should I start selling some of these? But I'll buy glassware and ceramics and stuff. So then I'm thinking, I've set up an Etsy site.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm thinking of trying to sell some of the stuff on there and sell some of my artwork. But there's a real issue with that. In Manchester, I was with a gallery, Comsa, so I could sell work through them. But like here, I'm not with a gallery. And that's how I think things have moved on. So I'm not going to just sit here waiting for somebody to come and buy. I need to get my work.
Put it out,
to try and sell stuff.
And you need to survive. You know, you're not just making things for people to go and look at and go, oh, isn't that lovely and interesting? And then move on. You want things that people can actually have in their home or their office space.
We kind of do both, and this is what they were talking last week about, this ecology. I make large pieces, a knitted piece, that was my degree work. I had to take it off. It was really sad taking it off. But that was 8 feet by 8 feet, and there was 3 of those. So they're in there. So that's my degree show work. And I've kept it in a box. Like say the photography is a good example. Like I will do small prints and I will sell those quite cheaply. But I want to make big prints. I like the gilet prints and museum quality work. And I do see the distinction between that making. Most of those knitted pieces were, as I say, about 3 feet by 3 feet, 86 by 86. But I'm halfway through one which is going to be like a really, really big one. And I was working on that all the way through the PhD. So just doing a wee bit every now and again. I need to get that finished. But that wouldn't be domestic piece. It would have to be for a big solo show. So I want to do a series of those, like big pieces. And I've got here, a lot of my work was, this is all acrylic wool. I've got here Aran wool,
Beautiful.
like really hand spun Aran wool. So I want to make a couple of pieces, you know, with real, really, really nice wool. So yeah, I would see a distinction between making work that's small, domestic, that people could buy, and that would fit in their homes, and then bigger pieces that I would want to make, you know, really push the scale. And you need to be commissioned sometimes. I think doing the PhD also made me realise I really enjoy working on projects that maybe last 18 months or 2 years, rather than, like, sometimes you do pop-up things. And people say, oh, do you want to put a piece of work in a group show? And I actually feel I've done that enough. I would much rather develop a body of work around a theme and then do like a solo show. And that takes, as I say, 2 or 3 years. Like, say, I remember Hugh Mulholland talking about, we'd gone round a tour and they'd worked with that artist for 3 years. Supported that artist in developing the work. And that's the kind of relationship that I'm realising I would like to have that now.
Yeah, and it takes time to build the relationships, it takes time to make the work, and the work is a research process as well as just becoming itself. In a very fast moving world, it's not valued that much.
It's trying to slow, and I think as I get older I value that more. I realise I've jumped about and I've tried to do different things, but actually I'm looking back now on the things that have sustained me as an artist, the things that I'm really proud of are, as I say, the projects that I worked on, like the PhD and the show at the Walker. That's where I get my benchmark of 18 months, because we did that where we put in the proposals. Me and the artist sat in the studio at Rogue. I came up with this idea and then we approached them because it was for the biennial, you know, they have that every 2 years. They are looking for proposals. So we came up with a proposal. So the idea was that the work would be there. We worked for over, as I say, it ended up about 18 months. And I edited a catalogue to go with that. So that was a lot. And we were fundraising, and so that was like a really good project. But then I got really ill afterwards. I got chicken pox.
Oh gosh.
I was really
so dangerous in your...
And then I realised that I would do these big projects and then just be so like knackered. Oh God, it was awful having chicken pox. I've had chicken pox twice now as an adult. So I know the signs. You know, you can get shingles. It's in your system. So during the PhD, I was terrified that I would get... The nice thing about the PhD is you can get up and work when you want to work, or you can work late at night. And you're your own boss. Where, say, then I was doing that show at the Walker. Well, I had my job as well. And trying to juggle using my annual leave to go and do an exhibition, you know, all that sort of stuff. And as I said, editing the catalogue, which I was really proud of. And it really pushed me and I learned a lot from it. It's those kind of projects I'm really interested in. Otherwise, I could just sit in here and potter about and do things. And that's nice as well. But I think I do like those big projects. And so now it's trying to set what's the next goal, really. But I would love to be doing postdoctoral research. You know, if I could find a project that I could work on, that would be good. But like you say, it's so narrow what I'm doing now. So whether I'd have to leave Northern Ireland to find, or put together a proposal and get funding here.
I don't think anybody's ever got a real answer to what's after a PhD, because you're either lucky enough to just get into a position that means you don't really have to think about it, or you end up having to drift because that chance never really came.
Well, I noticed the difference. Some of the people I was doing the PhD with, the proposal was written by one of the members of staff, so they were, and obviously the student took it and made it into their own project, but the member of staff sort of invested in it and maybe was their tutor, whereas it was my proposal, I wrote it, and they said, oh well, we're interested. I applied for one that they'd advertised and they said, oh, we're also interested in just speculative ones, and it was the speculative one that they accepted. So then they just had to find somebody to supervise me. I never felt that they really bought into what it was I was trying to do. And then I think then he wasn't getting any teaching, whereas I know a few people who got a bit of teaching, marking, helping with marking dissertations and stuff, just that wee bit of experience, and you can put that on your CV. But I've done lots of talks about my work. I like talking. You know, I really enjoy doing tutorials. And I'd love to do teaching on the foundation course if I could get on that. But I just know that it's loads of people going for a limited number of jobs.
That you'd put weird ideas in the students' heads, like you don't have to paint with paint.
I seriously would. I
Yeah.
seriously would. You'll probably leave here and you'll be stacking shelves in Tesco's when you leave here. So just enjoy
I
it
know,
while you're
that's
here.
it. Yeah.
Enjoy it while you can, but don't think there's going to be a job at the end of it.
There's not really enough of that, but then the universities need the money coming in, so they can't be honest about those things.
I feel like I have total imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
I
that's
totally
common.
don't feel, ever felt. I always felt like, they let me in, I got in through the door. You know, I was getting one over on them
Yeah.
every time I went in there and did stuff. And I would come up with these wacky ideas and nobody else was coming up. Why is nobody else suggesting these things? I mean, I am actually very creative and I
yeah.
am very unique in what I do. And I don't value what I do.
Yeah.
Why are they going to value it? Because I
Yeah.
don't. I mean, I applied in the first year for that British Council China programme and I had 3 weeks in China. And when I got it, it was really funny because I was sat in the department and I went, oh, fuck. And everybody looked around and said, oh, sorry. I went in to check my emails. And you usually get those, yes, thank you for your application. Unfortunately, you know, you're not successful. And he was like, yeah, we are pleased to say we'll spend 3 weeks in China. And I was totally scared. I realise now, I had 3 weeks there, and then it took me 2 or 3 weeks to get my back into, and then I had to do my Viva, and so it was a bit naughty of me to have done it. The supervisor said at one point, I hope we're not going to have the talk about gadding about. I had all those years of just, as I say, in my studio, working in an office, and then suddenly I was like, I can do whatever I want. It kind of went to my head a bit. And like to have the free time to be able to apply for things, because I'm finding it now, you know, there's opportunities. Last year I wasn't applying for a lot of stuff because I thought, but I don't know if I've got a job, I won't be able to do it. And now I'm just apply. Yeah, because last year I thought I would by now would have found some kind of part-time job, but as I say, loads of them I'm not even getting shortlisted for. So I think, okay, just apply for what I want to do and apply for loads and loads of stuff. And don't worry. And I was kind of like stopping myself from doing things.
Yeah, you should just do it anyway.
Because partly I made a kind of promise to myself when I did the PhD, you got to start being serious after this, because I don't have a pension. And I said, okay, you do this PhD, but afterwards you've got to get a proper job because you've got to be saving money for your pension. I'm still not. I know I haven't got a lot of money put aside. And, you know, you do have to be practical and prudent. But then at the same time, you can let worrying about money stop you from doing things.
It's a really tricky one, and you have to live your life as well, and you never know what's going to happen and when, so you have to take every day. I have the same fears.
Well, this is it. Everybody does. I'm talking to people and I go, oh yeah, actually this is quite reasonable. But then when I talk to my poor mum, she's in her 80s and she's so really worried. But at the same time, I think, I know one of my previous managers sort of said, okay, because there was a full-time job coming up. I said, I could do that and it's great money. And she said, yeah, but 6 months time, like in the middle of January, and you're having to get up really early in the morning, you're just going to go, why am I doing this? And she was right. I do tend to let myself get sidetracked into proper jobs, but I just want to try and keep this going as long as possible. But like you say, it's important to look after physical health and mental health. There can be quite a lot of jealousy and quite nastiness. I think artists are all nice and we're all in this together, but they're not. Do you know, people do gang up on each other. There is bullying. People resent you. Somebody made a joke. I got this studio and they said, oh, I hate the fact that you can afford to have a studio. I kind of know where they were coming from, but I'm doing that without a lot of stuff. I've got holes in my jeans, holes in my socks. I haven't had a holiday in years. And then my sister was talking about going away and I just said, I just feel like I can't go because I would be worrying about the money. But you need to have holidays. There's a lot of stuff I could have that I'm not. So I am sacrificing a lot to do this. It's almost like they're questioning your commitment or something.
When you strip it away, they're commenting on themselves, but they're just deflecting it and projecting, you know, but it's hurtful at the time.
So I was sharing a flat last year and I had problems with someone who was very narcissistic. I got a lot of abuse and that really undermined me a lot. And I had to ask this person to leave and it was a real shock. I learned a lot about, okay, I need to be not relying on other people's opinion of me and be my own sounding board, because there are people who will chip away at you. You were saying earlier on about the studio, what was really important at Rogue, it was a big old mill and I used to never work, sort of December, January, February. It was a bit of a write-off because I had these big windows, which was lovely, but there was like ice on the inside of it. You know, I had water running down the inside at one time. That's why I'm paying a bit extra to be here because I have heating and I have the internet, and I've been much more productive having this dedicated space.
Yeah.
So not having a studio would be a real big thing. It's very important. And so that's why it's important to have studio groups here in Belfast, because there was talk of maybe having one big building in the centre. There was talk about the Arts Council funding somewhere. Right. I don't know how feasible that was or how far that had gone. But yeah, a lot of them have moved. QSS have moved out here, and I've got the Vault. Have you been to the Vault?
Haven't been to Vault.
In December they had a tabletop art sale. I brought some pieces of art, and I also had some ornaments and odds and ends and the collectibles and stuff. I was just trying to clear out the house a bit of it. So you just used it as a car boot sale, and I sold quite a lot of stuff.
Great.
The place was heaving. It was amazing, and they had music and food. And it was really big. So I applied for a couple of residencies, and I'm going to apply for a few more. Because I think like last year I wasn't really ready for doing that, and now I feel I can go. I've got projects that I'm working on, so being able to go somewhere and work on those and network with people would be really good. But so for a few months there I was like, oh, what's the point? Why am I doing it? You know,
it's post-PhD blues is very normal as well.
Yeah. I had the flu in January, and that really, I was just lying in bed, and I was like, had no energy. I couldn't even like watch TV or read a book. I said, this is a low point. It doesn't get much lower than this. But I survived. I could tell, yes, the flu making me feel depressed, and I'm menopausal, so I have all that. So it's been a great journey the last few years. It's really important for me to find role models of other women, you know, in a similar position. And interestingly, that VAI event that I went to on Tuesday, the woman who was leading it commented on the fact that it was all women. You know, we feel we need that direction on our careers because the path just isn't as clear. And I do think it's still easier. The male model is a lot easier. I know talking to people, individuals, it's still hard for them, but they do have it a lot easier.
It's alright, we'll wrap up there.
Yes, I know,
Thank you so much for your time. It's been so informative.
Oh, good. Thank you.
All the best for future. Hopefully we'll have you on again sometime.
Yes.
Huge thanks again to Jackie for being so generous with her time and ideas. You've been listening to Audiovisual Cultures with me, Paula Blair, and Jacqueline Wylie. If you find the show, and in particular episodes like this involving travel and interviews, please support production with a small regular membership fee on patreon.com/avcultures. That will also give you exclusive extras, or you can donate to paypal.me/PEA Blair. Be part of the conversation with AV Cultures on Facebook and Twitter. Please rate, share and subscribe on your chosen platform to help others find the podcast. Thanks awfully for listening. Catch you next time.